I mean, I know we get so focused in on certain things that guys are doing, but I think as a whole, I watch our football team. I watch the player as a whole. We're evaluating each and everything they do, and I think they've gotten better. I think they're getting used to what my expectation is, how to play the position the way I see it through my eyes, and they've come out and done a great job of accepting the challenge.
Hey, alongside Nathan Zagura and Matt Wilhelm. How long have we been friends? Like 20 years?
A long time.
I'm Andy Baskin. It is the final countdown. I'm just so geeked up for camp this week. It's just 5 days away. You guys ready?
Ready.
Finally, camp is coming back. I can't wait.
Yeah, I'm excited. There's just so many storylines, and especially, in particular the Cleveland Browns that, we get to see each and every day out there at camp. I'm excited.
I'm pumped. I'm ready because I'm just ready.
The first camp of the Hugh Jackson era. This is going to be unlike anything we've seen, certainly recently. And I think one of the reasons as I go around town and you go around town and you go around town, people are excited. It's Hugh Jackson. This is the first time you're going to get to really see him put his stamp on this organization, and that's what I'm excited for.
I'm just excited to talk about some football. I mean, even if it's just practice plays or whatever it takes. So Hugh Jackson is getting set for his first camp as the Browns head coach, as you just said. Here's what he had to say about the players making their way back to Berea.
Well, I told them very clearly that I expect them to come back ready. We don't want to go backwards. I'm not going to let them go backwards. And it's really important that the men in the locker room don't let this team go backwards because they've established a really good foundation and a really good work ethic. So I think what's really important is that they come back here ready to hit the ground running and understand that we're here to get some business done, each and every day. And I think they will. I really do. To a man, I would be very surprised if we don't come back here in tip-top shape, ready to practice, ready and eager to get going.
Will the goatee be there? That's the big question.
No way. He's
way.
coming clean.
Goatee
clean and mean on the scene.
Here's what the first 3 days of camp look like. All evening practices in Berea next weekend. Tickets are free, but you have to register online at clevelandbrowns.com. So training camp is so close we can taste it. Players can return. A lot of guys are already here already, but it officially starts on Friday. So let's start with this question. How will Hugh's training camp be different than training camps of the past in Berea?
Physicality, pads, intensity, energy, movement, just getting through things with a purpose. And I think too often last year we saw a camp that seemed kind of like a country club atmosphere. They're going to be there to work. And Hugh Jackson says the only way you get better playing football is to play football. And that's, I think, going to be the biggest difference.
Absolutely. And I think, as we hear quotes from Hugh Jackson, on this station, on the radio stations, he's giving us part of his message so that we can buy in, but the message is probably significantly harder on what these players are getting in the locker rooms as they prep for training camp because the communication between head coach and his coordinators and then coordinators with the team and so on and so forth is to set a certain standard. You want to open camp and you want to close camp with a certain physicality and a mentality to get ready for the season.
And I've watched this All or Nothing, which is the show on the Arizona Cardinals, kind of like Hard Knocks goes through their season. What stood out to me about that is that Bruce Arians sets the tone for that whole organization and the way that he goes in and he's able to relate, resonate, and motivate his players. And I came away from watching that show saying as long as Bruce Arians is there, the Cardinals are going to be good. And that's what I want from Hugh Jackson. That's what I hope he can bring. And from the way he's able to relate to these guys, I think this is now the opportunity to take that first kind of impression to the next level and set the tone for how things will be done here now, future, going forward.
And veterans set the tone as well, too. I mean, you talked about it. We had rumblings about Camp Cupcake a couple times, about some of the things that were going on. Veterans set the tone. If they're listening and the new guys don't know any different, right?
Well, absolutely. There's an expectation that Hugh Jackson set, that he just mentioned that the veterans need to set in that locker room and govern that body of people. And I think as you see these, these young players, which is going to be, 14 draft picks, they're going to have to come in not only physically in shape, but mentally in shape. That means spending time in the gym on their own time, but also in their playbook, so they can come in and not lose all the progress they made throughout their offseason.
All right, around the corner, Saturday, August 6th, down in Columbus, the Browns will return to Columbus and Ohio Stadium for the Orange and Brown scrimmage. How important is the Orange and Brown scrimmage, especially, as I just said, for the young guys?
Well, that's the house that Wilhelm built. We'll start with the man right here.
It's going to be a really cool, entertaining opportunity for the Columbus community and people all over Ohio to converge on Columbus and Ohio Stadium to see their Cleveland Browns. But what it says to me and how it's particular to the Cleveland Browns, we're a young team, as I just mentioned. How were they when they get on a bus? What mentality do they take in there? Is it going to be a laid-back atmosphere because it's a little bit of a different and a change-up? Or do they ramp things up? because there are so many different position battles that if you can play well under the bright lights in front of 70,000 people, that is a check mark in the box of a coach that can take back as you evaluate who should be the starter and who should actually play a little bit more.
And I like what you say about that, getting on the road, because we're going to start 5 of the first 7 games on the road. And now between this and then the joint practices in Tampa, it's almost getting 2 opportunities to see what it's like. When the Browns play the Steelers, they get on a bus,
right.
They drive about an hour and a half to Pittsburgh, and that's kind of what this similar thing is going to be here in Columbus. So to see how they respond to that, and also for some of the guys who are drafted later that played in smaller stadiums like a Seth DeValve, going and playing in Ohio Stadium is probably going to be a pretty neat experience and almost kind of your welcome to the NFL moment. This is what you got to get used to.
It's also a milestone marker in camp because I think you get in the grind of doing the same thing every day, and it gives you something to look forward to.
I like the end of week 1. The end of week 1, that's your reward.
All right, so before you know it, we'll be playing preseason games, and you'll be able to watch many of them right here on News Channel 5, your official preseason home for the Cleveland Browns. Hugh Jackson talked a little bit about that and the depth chart as well. So let's take a listen in on Hugh.
If you're asking if some of the pieces in my mind are coming into focus, yes, somewhat. But still, you know, until you put on pads and grind it out every day and work like I anticipate in this team working, well, I really know about these men in tough conditions. And so that's something I'm still left to find out.
All right, what kind of a role do these preseason games play as far as making the team? And, you know, when you're fighting for a roster spot, you see a lot of, I just think preseason means a little bit more this year than before because you got a new coach and you got a lot of young guys.
Yeah, and I think when you look at it, this is the opportunity where the pressure's turned up, right? Doing it in practice is one thing. Now you're playing against another opponent, and this is where they want to see how you shine. So it's probably maybe some starting jobs are decided, but for, as you know, when you're in those battles to make the roster, that's your opportunity to really make an impression.
For sure. After you know, the first 2 weeks of training camp, as you said, you look forward to going to the Orange and Brown scrimmage. You look forward to lining up against someone beside, you know, your own teammate, and it gives you an opportunity to really have a litmus test of where are we at as a team. And then where am I at as an individual? Because there's probably maybe 15 to 25 spots that at that point in training camp are going to be locked up.
Yep.
Well, what about the other 30? Those are going to be decided based on the opportunities given in the first, second, and third preseason game to guys who can actually go out and do it in a home or away stadium, in a uniform, with the bullets flying and tackles actually taking guys to the ground.
Let's face it, when you're as young as this team is and you're going through turnover with a new head coach and a new front office, there are a lot of spots that are really going to be up for grabs, and these guys are going to have a chance to solidify their spot with the Browns.
All right, as we roll on talking about the preseason, the Browns and Bucs will hold joint practices in Tampa before their matchup. This will be the second year in a row the Browns will hold joint practices. They did it against Buffalo last year. Here's Hugh Jackson on heading down to the Sunshine State in just a couple of weeks.
And I think it's another opportunity to evaluate our team, you know, in a different setting, away from here. And again, teach our guys how to go on the road and prepare and be focused, but also, you know, understand that we're still in an evaluation mode as we start to put our team totally together. And it's always great to compete against somebody else, you know, other than a guy you compete against each and every day. So it gives us another opportunity to see a different team, a different colored jersey, a different defensive scheme, a different offensive scheme, and to prepare and also teach these men how to go on the road and focus and get ready to do what we need to do, because we're going to be on the road early, you know, in this season. So it's an opportunity for me. I see it as another teaching moment for our football team.
All right, I love and hate these all in the same reason. I love the fact because we always see a scrap or two. Guys are always fighting for a spot, and we always see a fight in these type of scrimmages. But I also get concerned about veterans and a young guy on another team who's trying to make a name for himself.
Yeah, but I think it's a very valuable thing. And I, for one, am very excited about this trip to Tampa, because I felt when we went to Buffalo last year, maybe we thought the team was somewhere that it wasn't.
Correct.
And it became very apparent after that first day. And I think this will be a good idea to see really where you're at, because people are trying to make a name for themselves. And these practices are almost more intense and more valuable in some ways than the game is going to be.
They definitely are. And I think to get down into Florida, you know, to play in the heat, it tests your condition, it tests your mental stability to be able to grasp what we're really trying to do and what we're trying to accomplish. And then even more so, I think it's a great opportunity to evaluate, hey, this is a franchise in Tampa that's probably in a similar boat as we are. The competitive nature should come out in both sides, and both want to take that step, but one's going to take it and one's not, and we hope it's going to be the Cleveland Browns.
All right, still ahead on Dawg Pound Report. We're going to take a look at one of the Browns' upcoming opponents this season. We'll hear from an insider about the New York Jets. Plus, we'll look ahead to some of the biggest position battles on offense heading into training camp. Back after this. Back here on Dawg Pound Report, Nathan Segura and Matt Wilhelm is his name. I'm Andy Baskin. Time now to learn a little bit more about one of the Browns' opponents this season, the New York Jets. We caught up with Jets insider Eric Allen to get a sense of where this team is at quarterback, especially with the Ryan Fitzpatrick holdout.
There's really nothing to report as far as the Ryan Fitzpatrick contract negotiations are concerned. Of course, the veteran signal caller came in here last season. First season with the green and white, 31 touchdown passes, set a franchise record, but there hasn't been a middle ground as of yet. Now, if Fitz does not come back, Geno Smith is the guy here for the Jets.
So, boys, how big of a deal is this impasse with Fitzpatrick, and what kind of an impact is it going to have on the Jets heading into camp?
What are they doing? You've got Brandon Marshall, you've got Eric Decker. They were a dynamic duo last year, 31 touchdowns. The guy sets the franchise record. They go 10-6, just missed the playoffs. You bring in Matt Forte. When you sign Matt Forte, that says we're trying to win now. So what are you doing messing around with the quarterback in Ryan Fitzpatrick? Geno Smith, we don't know what we've got in Geno Smith. Right. We've seen some good, we've seen a lot bad. Ryan Fitzpatrick should be there, or if they want to make a trade, maybe they end up calling the Cleveland Browns later.
They drafted Christian Hackenberg out of Penn State. Could they groom him behind Geno Smith and maybe turn the ball over to him halfway through the season?
And what happened to Bryce Petty? They drafted Bryce Petty 2 years ago. What are they doing? They're in a win-now mode. That's not a young team. So get Ryan Fitzpatrick in there and try to win.
Not having a deal, it doesn't help anybody. All right, Eric Allen also had to say, talk a little bit about the stable of running backs, including the addition of what you said, Chicago Bear, Matt Forte.
It's a different look backfield for the New York Jets here in 2016. A lot of folks think that running backs and 30 don't mix. Todd Bowles does not see it that way. Matt Forte, I think he's coming in here with something to prove. One guy he mentioned after signing with the Jets was Curtis Martin. Remember Curtis Martin, oldest back to win an NFL rushing title, and Forte pointed that out after he signed here with the Jets.
Well, running backs may be a dime a dozen, but Forte is not. He's an elite.
No, he's a great player, and I love this signing. And I think with the uncertainty at quarterback, whether you get Fitzpatrick back or it is Geno Smith or Hackenberg or Bryce Petty, no matter who plays quarterback, having the ability to run the football with Matt Forte, and then also him having over 100 receptions in a few seasons in his career out of the backfield as well. It gives you that quick option to get the ball out of your hands if you do have a young quarterback going for you early in the season.
Yeah, and I think for this team, you look at him, as you talked about, the dual threat nature of Matt Forte. I think one of the real keys for them is because he's not a speed guy, Marshall's not a speed guy, Decker's not a speed guy. Your former Ohio State Buckeye, Mr. Smith, needs to come in his second year, and he could really change that offense by giving it a vertical element.
All right, so what are the expectations for the Jets heading into this season?
After the Jets won 10 games in Todd Bowles' first season here as head coach, he said, "We made strides. We did not make enough strides." But the Jets do have a lot of talent here, and Bowles is going to take it week by week. But make no mistake, the expectations here are to make the playoffs and compete for a championship.
All right, get your quarterback, get this thing done.
Get the quarterback because, Matt, this is a very good defense with some certified studs on offense.
Yeah, Muhammad Wilkerson, you got Leonard Williams, you got David Harris. They put some money into this defense. I think, Buster Screen opposite Revis Island may step up and play some D. So it's going to be a challenge, but if they don't have a quarterback, it's a very up and down season for them.
All right, we're going to take a quick break here on Dawg Pound Report. And, Matt, we will see you very soon. Up next on Dawg Pound Report, the Gribbs. The new daddy, Andrew Gribble, stops by to break down one of the toughest training camp battles on offense. He'll explain when we come back. Welcome back. Nathan Segura is here, and this is the new daddy, Andrew Gribble.
Big Papa, welcome back, baby.
It's good to be here. It's been a busy, more than I ever expected because our Angel is sleeping way more than expected. It's been great.
How about that? Maybe that's a good omen for the Browns.
She's a team player, folks. Let's go.
All right, let's dive into some of the training camp battles on offense, and let's start off with quarterback. Nathan, you go first.
This is a good room now, right? You've got RG3, only 26. I think he is the odds-on favorite to start. I believe it's his job to lose. Then you have the KG veteran and Josh McCown, the young rookie and Cody Kessler, and now Austin Davis. I think the real competition will be, do they keep 3 quarterbacks? If they do, how does Austin Davis fit in? Where's Josh McCown fit in? Is he a guy, we're talking about the Jets, that maybe the Jets decide that's a better option for them than going with Ryan Fitzpatrick. He can still play the game, but I think this is RG3's room, and it's going to be a year to see what he can do.
I think a wrinkle to watch, though, is where does Cody Kessler fit in this? Because he's going to get a shot to compete. He was a third-round pick. You're going to throw him into the mix, see what he can do. But in an ideal situation, you want to put him in a situation where he can watch from the sidelines and learn and not even be pressed into that kind of backup duty, which is why McCown or even Davis is so important to have in that backup role.
All right, let's just play training camp real quick. Are we going to hear every day who's your starting quarterback? How long till we actually find out who it is?
Of course we're going to hear it. That doesn't mean that's necessarily going to be relevant.
When are we going to get an answer?
That's up to Coach Jackson. I'm hoping it comes before we go to Green Bay, because I think it's important for whoever it is, especially if it is RG3, to get every single rep possible with the ones. I think that's one of the things that's hindered us in the past. We're splitting up those reps with the ones. Get the guy that's going to be the guy every rep with the ones so he can be ready to hit the ground running when it's week 1.
Yeah, I mean, it may seem like that preseason opener comes pretty quickly, but you get a lot of football in before that opener. So maybe not an answer by the orange and brown scrimmage, but definitely by Green Bay.
All right, it's going to be a new look on the offensive line. How do we see the competition playing out up front?
You know, I think you got solid answers on the left side with Joe Thomas, Joel Bitonio, Cam Irving's at center, John Greco at right guard. So really all eyes are on right tackle, which is a job that seemingly was led by Alvin Bailey, the free agent signing over the offseason. But keep an eye on a guy like Spencer Drango, who's really impressed early on, 5th-round pick. And then a guy that we really don't know too much about right now is Sean Coleman, just because he hasn't been on the field very much so far.
Yeah, I think the real starting battle is at right tackle, as you mentioned. Bailey, Drango, who has impressed, and the coaches are very high on him, a guy who didn't allow a sack in his final season in the Big 12. And then Coleman, who's nasty, mean-spirited, going to be a physical run blocker. What's going to be interesting to me is because if you take those 3 plus the 4 you mentioned, that's 7 already. Do we carry 8 offensive linemen? Because Austin Pastore, to me, last year did enough to be on this football team, and we need to have that interior swing guy. So maybe they end up going with 8 offensive linemen and sometimes going with maybe a jumbo line package that we see from Hugh Jackson.
Yes, it's definitely not unheard of, and I think the versatility is always key with that backup role. But you also have to remember, too, John Greco can play multiple spots as well. So when you have one guy go down, you can maybe make some multiple switches.
Running backs.
Clearly it's a two-headed monster with Crowell and Duke Johnson, but then my eyes are going to be on who's going to be that number 3 guy. You're always going to try to keep 3 running backs. I think a Terrell Watson, the first player signed during the Hugh Jackson era, a really big running back that Hugh Jackson's clearly said is a running back. He's not going to be a fullback, but he's a between-the-tackles guy. He'd be battling with the likes of a Glenn Winston for that kind of 3rd spot, but I think we're going to see a Crowell Johnson makeup just like we saw with Jeremy Hill and Giovanni Bernard in Cincinnati.
Yeah, this is the position that is most set in stone to me at the top, and as you talked about, it's for the backup. Another name I'll throw out there because of how good he is as a returner is Raheem Mostert. He played very well for this team last year when he came in. He's looked pretty good in camp, but I think Terrell Watson's the odds-on favorite. His story is fascinating. There's one on Inside the Cleveland Browns from earlier today that people should check out, and also some good written word at clevelandbrowns.com.
All right, let's talk about wide receiver. Josh Gordon got to meet with the commissioner this week. We just leave that at where it is. Otherwise, where are we looking at wide receiver?
Well, I think obviously it's a young room, right? Corey Coleman's going to come in. I think he's going to be your number 1 guy. Then you've got Andrew Hawkins as the veteran who I think is most likely to make the team. Then you got Terrell Pryor, you've got Hollywood Higgins, you've got Ricardo Lewis, you've got Jordan Payton, who we're finally going to get a look at. It's a young room, but it's a diverse room in terms of the skill sets. It's going to be interesting because more than half the guys that we have caught 1 or fewer passes in the National Football League. So it's a young room, and I love that Chad Johnson or Chad Ochocinco is going to come here to really help these guys refine their route running.
You know, I think it's going to be similar to last year where there's not much expectations with the group, but you're going to keep a lot of guys on this 53-man roster. I think the interesting player to watch is a guy like Marlon Moore, who is incredibly valuable on special teams, and you're going to have to make a decision. Do you keep Marlon Moore because of what he can do on special teams, or do you have one of these younger receivers really emerge in that role and give someone that Chris Tabor can feel comfortable with filling all those roles? I mean, that's a key pivot spot on that rotation.
And I think the guy that can fill that role, because I think he needs a little time to become a receiver per se, is Ricardo Lewis. He's got the size, he's got the speed. There was talk about him, you know, in the draft, Nick saying maybe this is a guy that's going to go the defensive side. If he can come in and be that special teams guy for you, that helps, because I don't think you can't try to put one of these guys through the practice squad. You're not going to get Higgins, Payton, or Lewis to the practice squad. So they pretty much need to be on this team. And Moore is an interesting one. Guy, I go to battle with that guy all day. One of the toughest guys and best guys you'll see on this roster, but that's going to be interesting. And for where this team is and where they're trying to get, you're probably opting towards youth all things being equal.
And that's wide receiver is always a position in training camp where a fan favorite out of nowhere emerges.
Lens.
And that's going to be a storyline. I mean, it's going to be something that comes up, and we're going to be surprised. Maybe it's Darius Jennings. Maybe it's Dennis Parks. Guys that are completely off the radar that someone's going to step up because it's competition in that room.
Let me just move on to tight end. I mean, Gary Barnidge is the easiest slot to, other than maybe Joe Thomas, slot to pick and say, okay, this guy's here. What about the depth at tight end?
So it's interesting, really, when you look at the tight ends that are there right now. Randall Telfer was drafted out of USC in the 6th round last year to be kind of the physical blocking tight end, the heir apparent to Jim Dre. Does that fit with what Hugh Jackson wants to do? And is he going to do enough to beat out E.J. Bibbs, who's looked fantastic? Bibtacular is bringing it. And then Seth Devolve, that mismatch nightmare from Princeton.
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting because you kept 4 tight ends at the beginning of the season last year, ended up with 3 by the end of the year, plus a fullback. Do you end up keeping a fullback on this roster? We've seen Hugh Jackson's offense in Cincinnati doesn't use a fullback a ton, but that's going to figure into the math with whether you're going to keep 3 tight ends, 4 tight ends, 3 tight ends, and a fullback. So big opportunity for Seth Devolve, E.J. Bibbs, and the rest of the tight ends.
All right, Gribbs, thank you very much. Make sure you read them, clevelandbrowns.com. Still plenty more to come on Dawg Pound Report. Up next, we will wrap up the show with your Twitter questions. That's next. All right, we wind things down on Dawg Pound Report. We ask for your questions on Twitter using the hashtag AskDPR. First one comes to us from Kyle Bond. He asks, what player do you see winning the punt, kickoff, return job?
Well, you know what, Andy? That makes me want to go, because that's one of the jobs that really is open for interpretation. And I think when you look at it, it's going to be 2 former first-rounders. Justin Gilbert, I think, is going to be the kick return guy. Corey Coleman's going to return the punts. And for people who say, what, you can't have Corey Coleman returning punts, who is the Steelers punt returner? Antonio Brown. Right. The best receiver in the NFL. So let's not worry about that. Let's put our playmakers, get the ball in their hands as often as possible. Let's let Corey Coleman do that job.
And talking about Justin Gilbert, I mean, that's a positive. What you're saying?
Absolutely.
So we should feel good about him coming into the season.
I feel very good about him. This is probably the best you've felt about him. There hasn't been a lot of talk about Justin Gilbert, which is a good thing. And when you watch the tape, he doesn't stand out in a bad way. In fact, sometimes he's been standing out in a good way. The injury to Hayden gave him all those first-team reps the entire offseason. That's a good thing for Justin Gilbert, and we'll see what he can do with the pads.
All right, make sure you use the hashtag AskDPR on Twitter. Maybe we'll have your question. Next week, real quick programming note, we'll have our training camp preview show live from Berea on Thursday night from 7 to 8. Right here on News Channel 5, we'll have guests. You'll hear from the players, coaches, all kinds of surprises on the eve of training camp. That's when I'll see you next on Thursday night.
Let's do it.
And we'll see all of you as well. Thanks for watching Dawg Pound Report.